Okay, as I explained in the previous video, from now on I will be explaining all the assignments in the HTML format. This is the output format generated from R Markdown. So now we are in assignment 4, stock prices. So let's read the overview given here. In this assignment, we will analyze the data pertaining to stock prices of 10 different companies over a period of 3 years, from 1988 to 1991. The analysis answers the important questions such as trend of the stock prices using graphs, categorization of companies according to their return, etc. These results are arrived by using statistical tools such as scatter plots and its interpretation based on its shape, descriptive statistics such as mean, median, standard deviation, and so on. Now the analysis has been divided into 5 different sections. Each section starts with a question, followed by the analysis, including the code and its explanation. And in the last section, we conclude the results. So now let's see the first section. This section is basically to understand the data by reading it into R and perform some basic data inspection. So first we will read the data using read.csv function. You can find the CSV file in the description box. Please keep in mind the file must only be used for education purposes. Once we have read the data, then we can move on to check the structure of the data. So as you can see, the output of the structure is printed here. There are 11 variables in the data. One of the variables is the factor variable, that is date. Rest all the variables are numeric variables. These numeric variables are the stock prices of different companies. We can also check the summary of this data to know more about it. I will not go on explaining it. I will share this file in the description box and you can download it and you can see it later on. Now as we saw above, we have one column that has dates. Currently that column is shown as a factor. So let's change it to date format using the as.date function. Here the first argument is the date column and second argument is the format in which we would need our date. These are standard notations to be used. This combination means we need it in DD, MM, YY format. There are other formats as well which can be looked in help or internet as required. Now moving to the next question. Here we have to check how many observations are there for company A, company H and company J. So we will use capital N row to find number of observations in each company and then remove the NA values. So NA values are missing values in R. We always make sure that we don't have any missing values in our data before working on it. We use small n row / n call for data frames and capital N row / capital N call for vectors. You can check in help for more details. So first we will calculate the number of observations by counting total number of rows and subtracting the count of NA values. After this we can print them. Now moving on to the next section, which is question 2 of the assignment. Here we will create plots for each company. The question also deals with understanding the data, and hence visualization tools such as scatter plot is used to understand the trend of stock prices over the entire period of 3 years. So first we will remove the NA values from the entire data. We will use na.omit function to remove the missing values in one go from the entire data. After removing the NA values, we will store it in a variable called dat1. After this, we will create 10 scatter plots for all 10 companies. Now to plot all the 10 scatter plots on one screen, we will have to use par function as shown here. This simply means there will be 5 plots in each row and there will be 2 rows. Hence, there will be total 10 number of plots on one screen. Then we will use for loop as shown here. Here we are running the for loop from 2 to 11 because our first column is of date, which is not required. We will use plot function to plot the scatter plots. For plot function, you need to give x and y as first and second arguments. Here x is the date, y is the company. And then there are other arguments as well which can be added in plot function. Few of them we will use as we move along, or you can explore it separately on internet. We can add titles on the plot using title function. Here main refers to the main head of the graph, and ylab is used for naming the y-axis. After this, we will select the entire loop and run the loop. And here we have scatter plots for all the 10 companies. Also, you can see the explanation is given here. I have included such explanations after each code chunk that is either new or complex, so that you can understand it better. Now we can also create a scatter plots which will have all the data in one plot. In this case, we will use different colors for different companies. So first we will create a vector of colors. Let's call it D. It has 10 different colors that we will use for each company. Then we will use par function for creating only one plot as shown here. After this, we will use plot function and give x and y arguments. X is our date and y will be our first company. We will create one plot and then add remaining companies on that plot. That's how we do it. We will have to give few additional arguments such as type of plot, which is given as L, means line. Main title is stock price versus time. Now we will initiate for loop and add lines on the plot for other companies. Actually, we should have used 3 to 11 for running our loop instead of 2 to 11 because we have already added our first company to the plot. Anyways, it does not matter as we are learning the commands here. So this can be ignored. So we will use lines function in the for loop for adding lines to our plot. We will give the first argument, which is the dates. Then we will give the second argument, that is stock prices of rest of the companies. We will mention COL for the colors. Here we are subsetting D with I-1 because our I is starting from 2 and our D vector has colors from index 1 to 10. LWD is equal to 2 is the thickness of line. So as I said earlier, there are many different arguments which can be added to a plot. These are just to make the plot more interactive. Then we will run this whole code chunk and we will get this beautiful graph with all stock prices in just one graph. As you can see, we have our main title of the graph that we had mentioned, which was stock price versus time. So that is how we plot such type of graphs. Now moving on to the next section, that is section 3. The question here is, using the plots, can you group the companies by the shape of the plot into a few groups that behave similarly? Basically, we have to group the similar companies, then describe how you choose the groups in terms of the shapes of the plots, and how you decided which set of companies were in each group. And then a plot for each group may be a good way to show this. Now based on the shape of the scatter plot, companies can be divided into 3 broad categories as high, medium, low stock prices during the entire period. To do this, we will take a look at the graph and look for the below 3 patterns. So these are general patterns that we will look for in our graphs, and based on this, we will define them in a high, medium or low category. First is the linearity, which refers to whether a data pattern is linear, straight or non-linear curved. Then slope refers to the direction of change, and it can be positive, 0 or negative. And third category is strength, which refers to the degree of scatter in the plot. If the dots are widely spread, the relationship between variables is weak. If the dots are concentrated around a line, the relationship is strong. Now our categories would be high, mostly distributed above 50 and slope is positive. Medium would be between 25 to 50 and or slope is positive or uniform. Low would be below 25 and or slope is negative, that is decreasing. The number that I have chosen here, 50, 25, etc. are just for reference and there is no particular logic behind this. This is just for demonstration purposes. Now we will go to our graph that we have plotted earlier. But these graphs are not properly visible here. I think some glitches here. Anyways, if you plot it in R, you can zoom them and detect the patterns as I have mentioned below. And as I already did it, so the results are given below. So let's say company A is in medium category, company B is in low category, company C is again in low category, and so on. This was one way of classifying the data. We could use other methods like CAGR, that is cumulative average return per annum. There are various methods to classify the data. Now we will move to the next section. In this question, we are being asked to summarize the data for each company by finding a mean, median, and standard deviation for each stock price. So here we will first create three vectors in which we will store mean, median, and standard deviation as shown here. This is a pretty simple problem. We will use for loop and run through each company finding the three parameters. We have mean command for finding mean, median for finding median, and SD for finding the standard deviation. We will subset columns of our data using I, which will go from 2 to 11. That means each loop will subset one column based on the value of I and find the values of mean, median, and standard deviation and then store them in our vector that we have created above. So that is how we can find these values. Then we can also display this information nicely in a data frame format along with the company names. So for that, first we will have to create a vector which will have company names such as company A, company B, and so on. We will then create data frame using data.frame command. This will contain mean, median, and standard deviation in the columns. Then we will name the columns using callnames function. After naming the columns, we will give the row names using rownames function. Row names will be given from the vector of names that we had created earlier. After all this, we will finally print it. We have used round command to round the values up to 2 places of decimal here. We can then print the data frame as shown here. Now moving to the last section, that is section 5. Here it says the stocks are often grouped by average sale price and volatility, which is how much and how fast do the prices change. Can you create groups similar to those in question 3, which were done based on the plot shape for the companies based on average sale price and volatility? What statistics would you use as for those two measures? Give the groups descriptive names. Example, high volatility stocks or high average price or low volatility stocks, etc. And then explain how you made cutoffs for the grouping based on the statistics that you have chosen. So similar to previous question, we are being asked to group them. Let's see how we are going to do it. One way is we can use mean and standard deviation and create groups such as high risk / volatility and low average price, medium risk and medium average price, or low risk and high average price. Or for understanding the relative standard deviation, we can also use coefficient of variation, that is standard deviation divided by mean. Recall, coefficient of variation is used to compare degree of variation from one dataset to another. So here we will use coefficient of variation. So we will calculate coefficient of variation as standard deviation divided by mean. And then we can print it to see the different values. We will use this to see what is the range of covariance. So it is coming out to be 0.0958 to 0.283. Now based on the coefficient of variance values, we can divide the data into three different categories. First is the low, which is minimum to first quartile, that is between 0.0958 to 0.125. Second is the medium category, which is first quartile to third quartile, that is between 0.125 to 0.234. And third is the high category, which is third quartile to max, that is 0.234 to 0.283. Now based on the above values, we can assign each company a category as shown here. So that is how we have divided the companies into different categories. Alright, that will be all from this assignment. So if you see here, we learned few new functions in R. We learned about plots. We plotted scatter plots and line plots with different colors, and also delve a bit deeper into our data by analyzing stock prices and using some form of rationale to classify it into groups. We also used for loop to calculate mean, median, and standard deviation and created a data frame to store the results. And lastly, we grouped the data again based on covariance. So this is how we will learn programming as well as data analysis by doing different assignments. This way I think it is better and easier to learn the language. You don't have to mug up the commands. You can form a link between the functions of R and their applications. So that is all from this video. Thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you found the video helpful. Now I'll catch you up in the next video. Until then, have a great time. See you.